Well, I am. The road to the reservation. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter to Andrew Jackson, a young political leader in Tennessee. He told Jackson that the government should encourage Native American people to sell their forests and become farmers like the whites. 3 decades later, Andrew Jackson was president. Under his leadership, the government forced thousands of Indians off their land. Farming offered no protection. Even Native people who were farmers were removed from land that white Americans desired. Jackson's relationship with the Native Americans, however, had begun long before he became president. His own fortunes were tied to what happened to the Indians. Jackson against the Indians. Andrew Jackson moved from North Carolina to Nashville, Tennessee in 1787. In Tennessee, he practiced law, opened stores, and became a land speculator. Someone who buys a lot of land and hopes to sell it for a profit. That's a land speculator. Someone who buys a lot of land and hopes to sell it for a profit. For example, Jackson paid $100 for 2,500 acres of land along the Mississippi River and immediately sold half of it for $312. Years later, he sold the rest of the land for $5,000. The land had once belonged to the Chickasaw people. Okay. For example, Jackson paid $100 for 2,500 acres of land along the Mississippi River and immediately sold half of it for $312. So that half of it was probably worth $312. The whole thing was probably worth $700 or $800. A big lot like that, maybe closer to $1,000. Years later, he sold the rest of the land, so half of it, for $5,000. The land had once belonged to the Chickasaw people, but Jackson had negotiated a treaty with these Native Americans and opened it to white settlement. Jackson also had a triumphant military career in wars against the Indians. With the rank of general, how'd you get that rank? When you are a lawyer, you open stores, and you're a land speculator. How'd you get this military career? With the rank of general, he led American troops into battle with the Creek people, whom he called savage bloodhounds and bloodthirsty barbarians. When Jackson learned that hostile Creek had killed more than 200 whites at Fort Mims, near what is now Mobile, Alabama, he vowed revenge. On March 27, 1814, Jackson took his revenge in the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. At a bend in Alabama's Tallapoosa River, Jackson and his troops surrounded 800 Creek and killed most of them, including women and children. Afterward, his soldiers made bridle reins out of strips of skin taken from the corpses, and Jackson sent clothing worn by the dead warriors to the ladies of Tennessee. He told his troops, "These fiends will no longer murder our women and children or disturb the quiet of our borders. They have disappeared from the face of the earth. In their place, a new generation will arise who will know their duties better." Honored as a hero of the Indian Wars, Jackson was elected president in 1828. He supported the state governments of Mississippi and Georgia, which wanted to abolish Indian tribal units and let whites settle on lands that the tribes had been farming. The tribes' ownership of those lands had been guaranteed by treaties with the federal or national government, but the states were breaking the treaties. As Jackson watched the treaties being broken, he claimed he was helpless to do anything about it. This was not true. Authority over the Indians lay with the federal government, not the states. And in 1832, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that states had no power to make laws that affected Indian territories. Jackson simply refused to uphold the court's decisions. Now, see, that is just, that's tyranny. We called it tyranny, is what we used to call it. Now we call it terrorism. So we need to keep all these Congress people all instated in the new progressive laws on terrorism. So we don't even know. Tyranny, I don't even know. That's tyranny. That's tyranny when you refuse to uphold the court's law. Now, I get that there is tyranny when the court's decision is taking away the rights of the people, right? I mean, I've criticized the Supreme Court for a long time. Behind the scenes, in fact, he was working to have the Indians removed from their land. The state's goal in breaking the treaties was to end the authority of the tribal chiefs, turning them into ordinary citizens who must follow the laws of the whites rather than their own laws. The chiefs could then be bullied, bribed, or persuaded to move off their lands, and the rest of the Indians would follow. Otherwise, they're breaking the law, right? You're incarcerated. Who even knows when the judge will get to your case? All Jackson had to do was stay out of the way. In Jackson's view, Indians could not survive within white society. So you've got the same theme, right? Blacks can't survive in white society. Indians can't survive in white society. Chinese can't survive in white society. Jews can't survive in white society. Okay, so again, this rising theme. In Jackson's view, Indians could not survive within white society. His solution was to set aside a territory west of the Mississippi River to be guaranteed to the Indian tribes as long as they shall occupy it, as long as the grass grows or water runs. Jackson advised the Indians to move west. Beyond the borders of white society, they would be free to live in peace under their own governments. Jackson spoke of himself as a good father, wanting only the best for his red children. Taking the attitude that his position was both legal and morally right, he uprooted 70,000 Native Americans from their homes and ordered soldiers to move them west of the Mississippi. So his red children, really? He knows what's best for his red children. So patronizing. The removal of the Indians, like the importing of African slaves to work as plantation laborers, helped turn the American South into a cotton kingdom. The major cotton growing states, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, were carved out of Indian territory. The Choctaw became wanderers in a strange land. The Choctaw of Mississippi were a farming people long before the arrival of the whites. They grew corn. This is where I learned about it, exactly right here. They grew corn, beans, squash, pumpkins, and watermelons. And they shared their food freely with tribe members and with neighboring communities that suffered from crop failures. By the early 19th century, many Choctaw had turned to raising cows and pigs in enclosed farms in the manner of white farmers. So here we've got the mass production, as I've shown you 100 times, of the slaughters of all those pigs. Some Choctaw grew cotton to sell, and some owned black slaves. The government did not treat the farming Choctaw in the same way it treated white planters, however. Farming Choctaw suffered the same fate as the rest of their people. In 1830, the Mississippi state government ended the legal identity of the Choctaw Nation. In 1830, the Mississippi state government ended the legal identity of the Choctaw Nation and its ability to govern itself. Okay, now for a people who demands responsibility and independence, then goes and takes it all away, and then you blame them. So that's a system, right? Okay. This meant that individual Choctaw now had to obey state authority. Can you imagine? It's not just the fact that they had to follow it in their heads. It is also the fact that they were forced to follow this in their hearts, right? That they could not gather, right, in order to observe their spiritual beliefs. That's what I mean by the stuff in their hearts. They weren't able to practice their spiritual beliefs. I mean, there is no greater scientific system to genocide than what we're talking about right here. And don't mistake this. The roots of this is the scientists all involved in past history and today in eugenics, in good genes. Don't 9 months later, officials from the federal government met with the Choctaw at Dancing Rabbit Creek to negotiate a treaty that would turn their lands over to the government and remove them to the west. The Choctaw turned down the offer, saying it is the voice of a very large majority of people here present not to sell the land of their forefathers. Thinking that the meeting was over, many Choctaw left. But the federal officials refused to accept no for an answer. They bluntly told the remaining chiefs that the Choctaw must be removed from Mississippi or they would feel the weight of state law. If they resisted, they would be destroyed by federal forces. Under this threat, the chiefs finally signed the treaty. The Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek gave more than 10 million acres of Choctaw land to the federal government. Not all Choctaw had to migrate to the lands west of the Mississippi River. However, individuals and families could register with federal agents for a land grant in Mississippi like any white settler. This made it look as if the program gave Choctaw a fair chance to succeed in white society as individual landowners. In reality, the Choctaw never had a chance. As soon as an Indian acquired a land grant, a speculator loaned money to the Indian with the title to the land as insurance for the loan. When the Indian was unable to make enough money to repay the loan, the speculator claimed ownership of the land. In other cases, white settlers simply moved onto Indian land and squatted there, refusing to move. The Indians who had claimed land grants and then lost them had to move west along with the rest of the Choctaw. A year after the treaty, thousands of Choctaw began their trek to the Indian Territory across the Mississippi River. On the way, many of them encountered terrible winter storms. French traveler Alexis de Tocqueville witnessed the Choctaw crossing the great river and wrote of the conditions they faced. It was then the middle of winter and the cold was unusually severe. The snow had frozen hard upon the ground and the river was drifting huge masses of ice. The Indians had their families with them and they brought in their train procession, that's what it means, in their train, the wounded and the sick, with children newly born and old men upon the verge of death. That's an observer. Uprooted many Choctaw, and what I'm saying is the technical term of an observer. No emotion, just the facts, ma'am. So an interesting perspective. Uprooted many Choctaw felt bitter and angry. In his farewell letter to the American people in 1832, Choctaw Chief George W. Harkins explained why his people left their ancestral lands. We were hedged in by two evils, and we chose that which we thought least. The Choctaw had chosen to suffer and be free, rather than remain under laws that would not let their voices be heard. But they left unwillingly because their attachment to their native land was strong. That cord is now broken, Harkins declared, and we must go forth as wanderers in a strange land. The Cherokee of the Trail of Tears. Like the Choctaw in Mississippi, the Cherokee in Georgia were removed from their lands, and it's in quotes, legally. The Cherokee faced the same choice, leave or bow to white rule. Under the leadership of Principal Chief John Ross, the Cherokee refused to abandon their homes and lands. They insisted that the federal government must honor the treaties it had made, treaties that had granted the Cherokee Nation ownership of its territory and the right to govern itself. Their appeals fell on deaf ears in Washington. President Jackson sent an official to negotiate a treaty for Cherokee removal. Not all Cherokee agreed with Chief Ross that they should resist removal. A minority of them supported the idea of removal, and John Ridge, a leader among this group, signed a treaty saying that the Cherokee would leave their land in exchange for a payment of more than $3 million. For the treaty to take effect, it had to be ratified or agreed to by the entire tribe. The federal officials scheduled a meeting for that purpose, but the Georgia militia prevented the Cherokee newspaper from publishing an announcement of the meeting. The militia also threw Chief Ross in jail. Only a tiny fraction of the Cherokee Nation attended the ratification meeting, and no tribal officers were present. Only a tiny fraction of the Cherokee Nation attended the ratification meeting, and no tribal officers were present. Even some federal officials recognized that the treaty was a fraud. Still, President Jackson and the U.S. Congress said it was legal. Remember, the executive office is in charge of the military. The treaty set loose thousands of white settlers who seized the Cherokee lands and forced many Indians to abandon their homes. When the Cherokee refused to migrate, the federal government ordered the military to remove them by force. General Winfield Scott, with 7,000 troops, rounded up the Cherokee in a violent, cruel process, treating them as prisoners. The Cherokee were marched west in the dead of winter of 1838 to 1839. In the dead of winter. How about that? See, we call it depopulation today. They called it migration back then. Like the migration of the Choctaw, the journey of the Cherokee brought dreadful suffering. One of the disposed Indians said, "Looks like maybe all be dead before we get to new Indian country, but always we keep marching on." By the time the Cherokee reached the new Indian territory west of the Mississippi, more than 4,000 people, nearly a fourth of this exiled nation, had died on what the tribe still remembers as the Trail of Tears. What shall we do with the Indians? The Plains Indians who lived west of the Mississippi River also saw their way of life changed forever by the march of white settlement and civilization. The fate of one plains tribe, the Pawnee, was similar to that. What shall we do with the Indians? The Plains Indians who lived west of the Mississippi River also saw their way of life changed forever by the march of the white settlement and civilization. The fate of one Plains tribe, the Pawnee, was similar to that of the Southern Indians. Traditionally, the Pawnee had lived by farming corn and hunting buffalo in central Nebraska and northern Kansas. The buffalo hunt was a sacred activity, and the number of animals killed was strictly limited to what the Pawnee were able to consume. Then, during the 19th century, the Pawnee began to take part in the fur trade. Hunting started to become a commercial activity. Contact with white traders also introduced new diseases like smallpox, which reduced the Pawnee population from 10,000 in 1830 to only 4,000 in 1845. Nice blanket you have there. Tee-hee. By then, an even greater threat to the Pawnee had emerged. It was the railroad. In his 1831 message to Congress, President Jackson praised science for expanding man's power over nature by linking the cities together with railroads. At that time, the United States had just 73 miles of railroad track, but the network of railroads would grow. 30 years later, in 1860, the United States would have 30,636 miles of track, more than the whole continent of Europe. The railroad brought in a new modern era, one in which horses and Indians would have no place. In a few years, like Indians, horses will be merely traditional, declared a newspaper editorial in 1853. The railroads crisscrossed the plains and reached toward the Pacific coast, bringing the frontier to an end. Another writer asked in 1867, "What shall we do with the Indians?" His answer was that the Indians must take their place in white society under white laws or be exterminated. That's what the language was. That's the language of eugenics. This is the full picture right here. So we saw the partial picture there at the beginning of this chapter. Right here. And now here's the full picture, which really is just interesting to me. So there they are on top of the train, and you can see them getting rid of part of their spiritual experience. I mean, and if you can imagine what that might be, if you're one with nature in that way, then you could imagine the spiritual experience, as I've described before, is that the buffalo would just come there and just say, "Hey, listen, great job on the community spirits. I'm willing to go, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. This is my job, and I know how the circle of life works," right? Railroad politics. Behind the railroads were powerful corporations deliberately planning the settlement of the West and the growth of their business interests. Railroad companies saw the Native Americans as obstacles. They lobbied the government for rights of way that would let them build tracks through what had been set aside as Indian land. The railroad companies also pushed for passage of a law called the Indian Appropriation Act of March 3rd, 1871, which said no Indian nation or tribe within the territory of the United States shall be acknowledged or recognized as an independent nation, tribe, or power with whom the United States may contract by treaty. So now we've got a federal law. So see, if the federal law decides what is morally correct from the beginning, we could have a trickle-down effect of morality. Behind railroad politics, behind the railroads were powerful corporations deliberately planning the settlement of the West and the growth of their business interest. Railroad companies saw the Native Americans as obstacles. They lobbied for government for rights of way that would let them build tracks through what had been set aside as Indian land. I know I'm rereading it. Are you getting every single word? This is our land. we want to build our own railroad so that we can have our own communities and our own laws and get us started that way. Nope, can't do it. And then the Indian Appropriation Act of 1871, no Indian nation or tribe within the territory of the United States shall be acknowledged or recognized as an independent nation, tribe. So okay, whatever you think that you might want to build over there with your railroads, you're not independent. You don't have an independent state. You can't make your own laws. You can't just hire your own people. Sorry, I don't see how it would work. I just don't see how it would work. As one lawyer for a railroad company pointed out, the act destroyed the political existence of the tribes. It allowed the companies to build tracks across America, opening the West to new settlement. All this was seen by whites as the progress of civilization. Indians saw it very differently. They watched the railroad carry white hunters to the plains, turning the prairies into buffalo killing fields. They found carcasses rotting along the tracks, a trail of death for the animal that had been the main source of life for the Plains Indians. Now, why would you do that? Why would you do that? At the same time, white settlers complained that the Pawnee occupied some of the best land in the region. Settlers, their newspapers, and their leaders called on Washington to remove the Indians and their newspapers and their white newspapers. The Pawnee also found themselves under attack from the Sioux, a plains people who had lived to the north, pushed south by the white settlers moving into their lands and by the decline of the buffalo. The Sioux attacked the Pawnee, burned their crops, and stole their food. In 1873, the Sioux attacked a Pawnee hunting party at what came to be known as Massacre Canyon and killed more than 100 of them. Stunned by this tragedy, the Pawnee had to decide whether they should retreat to federal reservations for protection. So you knew that the Sioux had been incited. That's reading between the lines, but clearly there was a fear in the Sioux of the Pawnee, like you're next, and something ignited that. Stunned by this, in spite of the anguish of leaving their homeland, most felt they had no choice. They migrated to a reservation in Kansas. The identity and existence of the Pawnee had depended on the boundlessness of their sky and earth. But now railroad tracks cut across their land like long gashes, and fences enclosed their grasslands where buffalo once roamed. Indians had become a minority on land they had occupied for thousands of years. A Pawnee named overtakes the enemy said, to do what they, he means the whites, called civilizing us was to destroy us. You know they thought that changing us, getting rid of our old ways and language and names would make us like white men. But why should we want to be like them? Cheaters and greedy. The world the Plains Indians had known was coming to an end. A family's terrible trek. So in each one of these chapters, it ends with a story. All right, so here's the story. A family's terrible trek. Long time we travel on way to new land, a Cherokee said. People feel bad when they leave old nation. Women cry and make sad wails. Children cry and many men cry. And all look sad when friends die, but they say nothing. Just put heads down and keep on going towards west. 4,000 Cherokee, including many children, died of cold, hunger, or disease on the Trail of Tears in the winter of 1838 to 1839. And to take no responsibility for still making Andrew Jackson your hero is completely irresponsible. It's one thing that you don't want to repeat some of the horrific stories. It's another thing when you make these Confederate soldiers, militia heroes. It's entire, and to use up land which was once Indian, Native American, indigenous people's land, to do that is, it cuts like your railroads do, and you know it, and you know it does. Those who survived would have to make a new life in the unfamiliar land west of the Mississippi. Leaders among the Cherokee came forward to help their people during and after the trek. Jesse Bushyhead was one of them. His grandfather, John Stuart, had come to North America from Scotland with the British Army before the American Revolution. Stuart married a Cherokee woman and spent the rest of his life among her people, who gave him the name Bushyhead because of his distinctive mop of red curls. Jesse Bushyhead, Stuart's grandson, was raised in the traditional Cherokee culture, but he also attended schools run by white missionaries. By the time the U.S. government began removing the Cherokee from their land, Jesse Bushyhead had become a Baptist minister, a missionary to the Indians, and an interpreter who helped Indians and government officials communicate. Bushyhead opposed the government's removal of the Cherokee. When he realized that it could not be avoided, he gathered together his family and about 1,000 other Cherokee, mostly Christians, and led them west. And this is what I mean by the missionaries help ease the pain before the militia come in. They get them eased into complacency before the militia come in. The journey lasted 6 months. By the time Bushyhead and his followers reached the Indian Territory in Oklahoma, 82 members of the group had died. But this was a better record than many of the bands that traveled the Trail of Tears. One person lost from Bushyhead's group was his 17-year-old daughter, who died soon after the travelers had crossed the Mississippi. Other Bushyhead children survived. They would follow in their father's footsteps by becoming leaders and helpers of the Cherokee people. In the tribe's new home, Jesse Bushyhead served as an elder of the Baptist Church and had the responsibility of distributing food sent by the government to the Indians. His son Dennis, read between the lines here, folks, his son Dennis left the reservation to attend Princeton University and then to join the California Gold Rush in 1849. But he later returned and took up his role as a chief in Cherokee politics. One well-known member of the Bushyhead clan was Jesse's daughter, Carrie, who was 4 years old when the family set out on the Trail of Tears. Carrie survived the journey. After the family reached Oklahoma, she attended a school for Cherokee girls, then went on to teach many Cherokee children at another school, the Baptist Mission. Long after her death in 1909, the survivor of the Trail of Tears was remembered by her students and others in the community as Aunt Carrie. So this is kind of interesting. I don't know. It's like there's still part of some stories that are a little bit missing, isn't it? That was chapter 4. Next we will have chapter 5, Life in Slavery. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. We have just gotten through Hump Day here Wednesday, August 13th. In the classroom, the day is 233. Thank you so much for joining me here in the classroom with the teacher, Dr. Ronald Takaki, where we keep all those colors healthy in their mind, their body, and their spirit. Thanks for joining me.